Hello, kids. So we are going to be starting chapter 10, and chapter 10 is going to be about measurement. What I'd like to do is kind of give you a little bit of an intro to measurement before we get into some of the lessons in our math book. Sometimes measurement can be confusing, so hopefully I can break it down a little bit for you and make it a little easier to understand. Okay? So here's what you need to know. First things first, you need to understand the basics. So there are two systems of measurement. One is the US or the customary system, which we use here in the United States. And then there's the metric system, which is used all over the world. And we've touched base on the metric system also in science class, because that's where you see a lot of the metric system used in America too. We use the metric system. Okay, so measurement basics. We have a length. Length is the distance of something measured. Then you have volume or capacity. That's how much something can hold. And generally, we think of liquids when we use volume and capacity. Weight is how much something weighs, and mass is how much space something takes up. So the US system has many different units of measurement, and each unit has a completely different name. They also have completely different conversion factors, which we're going to get into. The metric system has a base unit and then it has many different prefixes. So the base units for the metric system are meters, liters, and grams. Meters measures length, liters measures volume or capacity, and then grams measures mass and weight. So, and I've included a couple pictures here that have been helpful throughout the years when we go through and work on the metric system. I'm going to get into these a little bit more in depth once we get to those lessons in our book. Okay, now when it comes to measuring and measurements, I really am a visual person, and I think I found some good visuals to help you kind of relate each of the units with a picture so that you can have it in your brain. And like if I say gallon in your head, you can see a gallon of milk. Okay, so for the US system, when we're measuring volume, we have fluid ounces. So if you take a look at like a teaspoon, you're looking at ounces. Okay, cups, if you think of like a small carton of milk, a pint would be like a pint of ice cream. Quarts, you have the quart of milk right here, and then your gallon of milk. Now, when you're measuring volume with the metric system, we're using liters, remember, because that's the base unit. And then you have some prefixes. Now, this one just gives you milliliters and liters, just so you can kind of in your head picture and imagine what a liter would be. So if you can see a liter of soda, that's a liter. And then milliliters, like when I'm giving medicine to one of my kitty cats, I use a syringe and it has milliliters on it. Okay, so just so you kind of can get that concept in your mind of how big each of these are. Okay, so that was volume. Here is another way. This is another picture, and I'll tell you what, this letter G, they call it the big G. And then with each of these, with this picture and each of the different measurements inside of it has really helped me to remember the different conversions. So for volume for the US, remember we had fluid ounces, cups, pints, quarts, and gallons. So I like the way they put these different pictures of the milk here for us. So in this cup down here, in one cup, there are 8 fluid ounces. Okay. And then if you look at this picture, this big G represents a gallon, okay? And then within that, you see four Q's, which Q stands for quart. So there are four quarts or four V's in 1 gallon. Within the Q, there are two letter P's, which means there are 2 pints in a quart. And then within the letter P, there are 2 cups. So there are 2 cups in 1 pint. Okay, so when you look at that, then there are 4 quarts in a gallon. So then how many pints would be in a gallon? 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, then how many cups would be in a gallon? So then we'd have to count the C's. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 cups in a gallon. Okay, so I think that's a really good representation, and that helps me to remember those because sometimes those are a little tricky. Okay, so now if we measure length within the US system, we have inches. So you can see this little inchworm down here. You have feet, and they're showing you between your wrist and your elbow is about a foot. So if you would go ahead and you would take a ruler and you would measure that, it would be about 12 inches or a foot. Okay, then yards, kind of like a giant step. And then miles is like that would be like a road trip. And I always tell the kids when you have to run your mile in gym class, that's like 4 laps around a track, typically, depending on the track. Okay, and then remember when we do the metric system, we're measuring length with meters. And I have showed you guys in class a meter stick. Okay, so that you can kind of get that in your head a little bit as far as the meter. Okay, so then the next one is weight or mass. So in our US system, we have ounces, pounds, and tons. So look at the bottom, you can see we have ounces would be like a piece of bread. Pounds would be like the loaf of bread. And then the ton would be like a truck. So you can see it goes from lighter to heavier. Just so you can kind of get that in your head. For the metric system, you have grams. So remember, gram is the base unit, and then you have prefixes. So you have milligram and kilogram. So this kind of gives you an idea here of from smaller to larger with the feather, the paper clip, and then the baseball bat. Okay. All right. So then remember I told you that there were 3 base units in the metric system. Well, these are the prefixes. Milli, centi, deci, deca, hecto, and kilo. Whoops, let me go back. I went a little too quick. Okay, we're going to get into these more specifically and in more depth when we get to this lesson. But here's also another visual kind of to help you imagine those lengths in your mind. So like the millimeters, like the thickness of a dime, the centimeter, um, the width of your pinky. Another one for centimeter would be like the width of a paper clip. I know a lot of places, a lot of times we'll use that as an example. And then a giant step, like a meter, and then like a kilometer would be like a road trip, kind of like miles was. Okay. Oh, and by the way, go if you want to check out. I put a little song on here for you for the metric system. Wouldn't be complete without a song. We know that. And this is another diagram that we'll be using once we get into this in our book. And remember I said we have our base units. So right in the middle of this chart are your base units. Your meter, which measures length, your liter, which measures liquid volume, and then your gram, which is mass and weight. Okay, so those are your units, base units, and they are abbreviated M for meter, L for liter, and then this G for gram. Okay, so then One of the ways that you can, kind of a silly way to remember the order would be King Henry died unusually drinking chocolate milk. So the K standing for kilo, the H standing for hecto, the D for deca. Remember the U for in unusually is the unit, your base unit, and then the D for deci, C for centi, and the M for milli. Okay. And then if you look down here, these actually give you all of the abbreviations for each of these, which once again we will be getting into in more depth when we get to this lesson in your book. But I wanted you to have this and be able to come back and reference it if you need it. Okay, so then here are just some conversions, which we looked at a little bit a second ago, but if we have, right here, we have 12 inches in 1 foot. Okay, so think of your ruler for this. And then there's 3 feet in a yard. So if I would put 3 rulers next to each other, they're going to get you a yard. Or remember, in class I used the yardstick. And then there's 5,280 feet in a mile. Okay, and then you could also break that down a little further there. If you wanted to know how many yards were in a mile, you would just have to divide 5,280 feet by 3 feet, because there's 3 feet in the yard, and that was going to give you 1,760 yards in a mile. Okay, I put this one on here again too. I thought this was just, it was just, the other one was hand drawn. This is more of a formal big G right here. So remember I told you before that there are 8 fluid ounces in 1 cup. There are 2 cups in a pint. So if you look at your 2 cups inside the P, and then there are 2 pints, the 2 P's inside a quart, 2 pints in a quart. And then there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. Okay. The last thing on here for weight would be that there are 16 ounces in 1 pound, and there are 2,000 pounds in a ton. Once again, check out this numbers rack, ounces, pounds, and tons. I think you'll like this song. Hopefully this gave you a bit of an overview into measurement. And like I said, we'll get into more detail as we get into the book.